And so tonight, I'm pleased to welcome author James Howard Kunstler. He is with us to discuss his new novel, The Witch of Hebron. Now, more than ever, we are inundated with facts, charts, and scientists detailing the demise of our world. And though it is a grim subject matter, it seems that The Witches of Hebron rises to the task of being both an entertaining and prophetic sequel. Of The Witches of Hebron, Booklist writes that it is a suspenseful, darkly amusing story with touches of the fantastic in the mode of Washington Irving. And from Publishers Weekly, Kunstler's post-apocalyptic world is neither a merciless nightmare nor a starry-eyed return to some pastoral faux utopia. It's a hard existence dotted with adventure, revenge, mysticism, and those same human emotions that existed before the power went out. Mr. Kunstler is a regular lecturer around the country, speaking on issues such as urban development and environmental crises. A former staff writer for Rolling Stone magazine, he contributes to diverse publications, and his popular blog, Clusterfuck Nation, charms many avid readers. Previous works include World Made by Hand, The Geography of Nowhere, Maggie Darling, and The Long Emergency. He is also a leading proponent of the movement known as New Urbanism. We are very thrilled to have him with us this evening, so will you please join me in welcoming James Howard Kunstler.
And thank you all for showing up. It's very nice of you to come on what probably couldn't be a foul or early fall night. I thought I would sort of do two and a half things. Talk a little bit about long emergency issues and maybe update them a little bit, and maybe entertain a couple of questions, and then read a couple of scenes from The Witch of Hebron, since that's what traveling authors are supposed to do, and I kind of like doing it. It's fun, and we can talk a little bit about that too. I think what's probably going on right now in the background of our lives, or maybe even the foreground, is we're seeing kind of a horse race between two forces that are vying to put us out of business as an advanced economy, advanced civilization. And they are the fiasco in banking and finance and the predicament with energy. And actually, in the last 12 months, the financial fiasco has pulled a little bit ahead, and looks like it's for the moment, has more potential to get us into trouble. Although it should be understood, of course, that these are both mutually reinforcing problems, and that the problems with banking and capital are certainly going to redound into the problems of energy when we discover, if we haven't discovered already, that we don't have the capital to find more oil. And that's going to be increasingly a problem. A very important bit of news came out just today on the internet that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is down over 11% in oil production from 2008 over 2009, or at least that was whatever the final figure is for that period. Apparently came in only in the last 48 hours, and now it's being publicized, and now, that's a very significant number, because Saudi Arabia, of course, is I think our number 2 source of imported oil after Canada. Mexico used to be Saudi Arabia and Mexico used to swap off being 2 and 3. Mexico is in such steep depletion that they've actually gone from 3 to about 6 now in about 12 months. But Saudi Arabia, of course, has a very quickly growing population, and they subsidize their gasoline, and they are selling more cars every year, and they're using a lot more of their own oil. And what that means is that Saudi Arabia is going to have less and less oil to send to everybody else in the world. So it's just another signal that we're getting into trouble with all that. I go around the country, and there's a great clamor for solutions. everybody who is even talking about these issues, it wants to talk about solutions. But I've discovered something a little dismaying. Most of this talk about solutions is actually code for the idea, can't we find a rescue remedy so we can keep running all the stuff we're running the way we're running it? And, I've discovered that at places like the Aspen Environmental Forum, where I was for 2 years in a row. And whenever the subject of car dependency and our oil import problem came up, the only thing that these people wanted to talk about was all the nifty ways that you could run cars without gasoline, And that clued me into something, that at the level of the most elite green level, that they don't want to have they don't want to have an intelligent conversation about this problem. They never talk about walkable communities. They're not interested in public transit. There's virtually no lobbying from any sector of the body politic, including the people and places that ought to know better, the Greens, the Harvard, whatever, the intelligent, educated minority of Americans. They're not talking about that. They're not interested. And that gives us a clue about where we're at. And where we're at, it can be stated very succinctly, that we are unable to construct a coherent consensus about what's happening to us and about what we're going to do about it. And the smart people can't do it, and the NASCAR morons can't do it, and nobody can, and the people in the middle can't do it. So no one's doing it. And, I was talking to one of the people in the audience before the program, and we were talking about exactly this. Why is this? And it's very hard to account for. I mean, there are ways you can account for it. There's the idea, which is not my original idea, but it's a good one, the Consensus Trance. That was, it was conceived by some psychologist from USC, but then the guy who wrote that book, Technosis, Eric Davis, kind of expanded on it. It's a very good term, the Consensus Trance. And it's so sort of self-explanatory. There's just a lot of noise in the system. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance. We have a lot of clashing ideas. As you can state categorically that delusional thinking rises with economic distress. So the more economic distress goes up, the more delusional thinking there's going to be. And we can see that expressing itself in the Tea Party and the quality of the conversation on cable news, with people just shouting at each other. So it's all pretty self-evident. But, if we don't have a coherent conversation, public debate about these things, and if we don't construct a coherent narrative or body of agreement, consensus about what's happening to us, we're just going to slide into a whole lot of trouble. And it's beginning to look like that's exactly what we're going to do. Anybody want another one? Anybody ready? Because we're going to drain this bottle. Okay. I'll give you another opportunity. Don't be shy. A lot of the delusional thinking is focused on alt fuels. Unfortunately, the idea there is mostly the idea that we're going to run Walmart, the U.S. Army, the interstate highway system, Walt Disney World, and suburbia on something other than oil. And it's just unlikely. I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think we're going to run that stuff on any combination of any stuff. In fact, I think we're not even going to run a substantial fraction of it on that stuff. But the bottom line is simply this. I don't want to be misunderstood as being against alternative energy, because I'm not. I'm quite sure we're going to try everything that we can and do everything we can, but we're going to be disappointed by what these things can do for us. We're not going to run Walmart and suburbia and the interstate highway system on this. All these fantasies about changing out the internal combustion gasoline engine car fleet for a whole fleet of electric cars is probably never going to be anything but a fantasy. Um, and one of the interesting problems with this is that very quickly, as the problems with capital and money and finance get more severe, and car ownership becomes more difficult, because the way that Americans have been used to buying cars for 60 years is by buying them on installment loans. And there's going to be less and less capital, and there are going to be fewer and fewer loans, and that's the way people are used to buying cars. Do you want a glass of wine there, ma'am? We're pouring. Okay, well, boy, it's hard to sell wine around here. It's going to become increasingly undemocratic. It's going to become an increasingly undemocratic system of happy motoring. And, every year there are going to be more and more disaffected, disgruntled, grievance-filled, resentful people who used to be able to drive cars and now find that for one reason or another they can't. And believe me, that's going to become a political problem, although there's every likelihood that it will mutate in the political process, and it could be expressed as anything. I mean, there will be this body of anger over here, but it may come out as like kill all the homosexuals, or we hate black people, or it could be anything, right? So, because that's sort of what's happening now, but it's only an indication of how perverse politics can get. So, instead of solutions, for the last year or more, I've been trying to promote the idea of let's stop talking about solutions because it's grandiose. And one of the main things that we're suffering from right now is technological grandiosity and organizational grandiosity. We're just grandiose. And we need to talk about this in terms of intelligent responses to these problems that we're having, intelligent responses to the predicaments that we're in. And they're predicaments. They don't all necessarily have rescue remedy solutions. And finally, I think that the message that's coming from reality is that we have to make other arrangements for a lot of the things in normal daily life. And, we're going to have to grow our food differently. We know that. We're going to have to do commerce differently. We're going to have to do transportation differently. We're not going to be suburban the way we have been, incrementally less and less. And probably we may reach a point where, suburbia becomes seriously dysfunctional and seriously, severely loses its value. So we're going to have to do all those things differently. We don't want to talk about it. And we'll see how this works out over the next couple of years. My guess is that, we sort of squeaked by in 2010 by pretending that all the bad paper that's out there everywhere, it's in the vaults of the banks, it's in the vaults of the Federal Reserve, it's in the local banks, it's in the pension funds, it's anywhere that people have investment paper. This stuff has gone, and it's lying there rotting away, and we don't want to declare the losses because if you declare losses on loans that are not being paid, money disappears, including your money, if you're a bank or whatever entity you are. Even if you're a person, if you declare your losses, sooner or later, you're bankrupt. And it's true of all these things. So that's where we're at with that stuff. And does anybody have any questions about that? Because then we'll get to part B. By the way, I write a blog every Monday, and this week I wrote about my adventures in the world of commercial aviation, which were unhappy, shall we say. It was interesting, though. Are there any people here who actually write the comments on my blog?
Oh, write the comments?
Yeah. Because It was just amazing that I got the most humorless response from this group of people. They didn't seem to understand this was comedy, even though it was a rather cruel comedy. But sometimes comedy is pretty cruel. I have I have very mixed feelings about it. I think that I still sort of stick by what I said in the long emergency, that if we want to keep the lights on in 10 or 20 years, we may have no other choice but to do that. But I understand the hazards are very, very severe. But also there are a couple of new things in the picture. One is that it's tremendously capital intensive to build the infrastructure for nuclear power. And now that we're in a situation where capital is vanishing, investment, stored, accumulated wealth that you can deploy for useful purposes, that money is vanishing, and this is the money that we had hoped would build a post-oil economy, and the money's not going to be there. I think we're going to be too broke to build reactors. I think that's going to be the next thing. I mean, apart from whatever the hazards of nuclear are, and all the subsidiary questions. So, and it doesn't look like we're going to resolve any of the arguments over it anytime soon anyway. So the longer we argue about it and don't have a consensus to go forward with it, the more likely it is we're not going to have the money to go forward with it anyway, and maybe not even the political kind of integrity to go. We may end up in a society that's so fractured that it can't be done. No, the sad answer is no, and I think that the further answer is we have a comprehensive failure of leadership in America. We have a failure of political leadership, business leadership, media leadership, academic leadership, and sometimes this happens in societies. The last time this happened in America that I am aware of was the period in the mid-1850s where you have a moral predicament. It wasn't an energy predicament, but it was a severe social and moral predicament of slavery. And it appeared to be irresolvable after decades of struggle. And the faction that was in power, that ran things really through the 1840s and 50s, the Whigs, vanished overnight. They just went down a drain somewhere, where are the Whigs? They vanished so quickly. This, of course, is what I hope may happen to the Republican or Democratic Party, or both of them, But it hasn't yet. But it was an amazing thing. And then there was a kind of a political vacuum in the country. And meanwhile, you had these presidents, that are now notorious for being non-entities. You had Franklin Pierce and Millard Fillmore and James Buchanan, and nobody in this room can mention a single distinction of any of them, I bet. You get a glass of wine if you can.
Distinction?
Yeah. Millard Fillmore opened Japan, right? We know that. He didn't do it. Commodore Perry did it while he was president. But, out of this vacuum comes finally a Illinois railroad lawyer who was once a congressman, didn't get reelected in the 1840s. And he has really one gift, and that is an ability to articulate exactly what the terms of the coming convulsion will be. And he makes it clear what the convulsion is going to be and clarifies it for everybody, and manages to get elected largely because there's a multi-party race going on that year. And the moment he's elected and on his way to being inaugurated, the Union breaks up and we enter the convulsion of the Civil War, which is resolved about, 3 or 4 days before Lincoln is shot, and then becomes, really is converted to sainthood as a result. But, the important part is that finally somebody comes along who can articulate what's going on. And there's nobody now in politics, business, media, or academia who is able to articulate what's going on. But as I guess Mark, huh? I don't see Al Gore talking up about the energy problem. I don't see Al Gore making any statements about the banking situation. We need to prosecute people in on Wall Street. The rule of law has got to be reestablished in money matters, and we're not doing it. And that's my main objection to Barack Obama, who I voted for. If you don't have the rule of law in money, you will not have confidence in money. And if you don't have confidence in money, all bets are off about the financial system. And we're now, willfully destroying our money system by failing to reintroduce and reestablish the rule of law. So, and I got a little lost. Well, my opinion about the GM thing is, I won't go on about this because it's a big pet peeve of mine, but, we desperately need to rebuild the railroad system in America, and not a high-speed rail system, which would have to be a totally parallel system with new tracks and new rights-of-way, which you would never legally acquire the land. The eminent domain problems are so enormous that you'd never overcome them. So that's another fantasy. But we need to rebuild the railroad system. I think if the Obama administration was thinking straight, they would have compelled General Motors to get into the rolling stock business for railroads. It would have compelled them to build choo-choo train equipment. They could still build cars, but now you have to do this. I've been in Michigan twice in the last 3 weeks. In fact, I was all over the place. I had to go up to Saginaw. I was all over Detroit last week. And the Obama administration has put gazillions of dollars into highway reconstruction and new construction in Michigan just to put people to work because it's such a depressed economy. But the amount of money that they're using just to fix the off-ramps in Michigan, you could probably build or rebuild an entire passenger rail network in America with. And so that whole thing is just an appalling catastrophe. The way that's gone on. I do happen to think that Barack Obama is probably a nice fella. He's probably a decent fella. He's obviously not stupid, but he's as I actually said in one of my blogs this year, he's becoming the Millard Fillmore of this period. Millard Fillmore was probably a nice guy too. Who knows? It's self-evident that the disparity in wealth in the U.S. is getting very, very big. And who knows what will happen, and sometimes societies have revolutions, sometimes people just suffer. And, from what I can tell, apart from the Tea Party stuff, which I think is very confused, since so many of them are really militating to make Wall Street richer, I don't really see any concerted consensus among people who are getting screwed to do anything about it. So, I've said this before, but I still believe it. Life is tragic. Life is tragic. And sometimes societies make bad collective decisions and they suffer. And history is merciless, and history doesn't care about our complaints and our excuses, and and history doesn't care if we're crybabies. Even that's not going to work. So you have to be responsible in your society for stuff, and these things are very, very hard to work out. I do kind of think that one possible scenario is this: revolutions sometimes begin over the issue of people starving, people being hungry. And that kind of entails the whole question of who owns productive land. And this is kind of a hidden issue right now, but I do think that as time goes by and we get into more problem with our food supply, and the cheese doodles are not making it to the supermarket shelves, that you'll begin to see maybe some anger over who owns the land, and talk about seizing land in one way or another from people who have it, and that's that's historically and conventionally the way revolutions begin, with property being seized. And so that's the thing to look for. Okay, I'm going to move on to the part of this program about the Witch of Hebron. After I wrote that book, The Long Emergency, I wanted to depict as vividly as possible what life might be in the post-petroleum and post-collapse, post-economic collapse world. So I wrote World Made by Hand, kind of an exercise. Now, I had written a lot of novels before that. It wasn't like I didn't know how to do it or didn't have any experience. I felt pretty confident that I could write the novels. My publisher didn't want me to do it, but they always want you to do what you did before. Can't you write Long Emergency 2? It was actually pretty funny because at the time I was without an agent because I sold The Long Emergency without an agent. My agent didn't want to sell it, so I fired him. And for about 2 or 3 years I didn't have an agent. And I handed in World Made by Hand, and they made a really insulting offer on it. And just at that moment, a young kind of hustler who had just started his own literary agency called me up and said, "I'd like to represent you." And his name was Adam, but he went by the name Snapper. And he turned out to be this 6'4", hulking, scary guy. So when that offer came in, about 48 hours later, I responded and I said, "You have to talk to Snapper now." It was really the most satisfying moment in my whole career. And he went and talked to them, and I think he went to talk to them with a fungo bat or a sock filled with BBs or something, because they came around. Anyway, so then I wrote World Made by Hand, and there were numerous complaints about World Made by Hand from the carping complainers out there. One of them was that what's all this supernatural hocus pocus in World Made by Hand? Well, I will now explain it for anyone who maybe couldn't put it together. You have a failing society and a failing economy, and it's represented in a town by these townspeople in this little town. And a group of kind of mystical evangelicals moves into their town from elsewhere. And what you really have is a clash of worldviews. You have a kind of neo-medieval, semi-magical worldview that is colliding with the residue of the Enlightenment. The baggage of the Enlightenment is, logical positivism, empiricism, science, technology, has failed all of these regular townspeople. It has failed them. And along comes these people who are, these Jesus people who seem to have some other mystical element going on amongst them. So I'm simply trying to make the point that in a narrative way, in a dramatic way, that worldviews change. I'm not a proponent of being magical. I'm not religious myself. I don't believe in the supernatural myself. But I do think that perceptions of reality change very much from one age to another. And it's all about the perception of reality. Because the reality is still reality. It's just, whether you look at it through the lens of the Enlightenment or the lens of, the re-enchantment of the world. Just as a practical matter, what was in my mind when I created the Queen Bee character was that she was an epileptic clairvoyant. She wasn't really from another planet, but she's real strange. She's real strange. And so I've elaborated her some in this book. And I want to read you a couple of scenes. One, maybe three, it depends on how we're doing for time. But the first scene is about Brother Job, who is the head of the New Faith Christian Church of Jesus. Or I forget, they have various names for themselves. The New Faith Order, the New Faith Covenant Church of Jesus, is an evangelical group that has moved up from the disorders of the Sun Belt in Virginia, where they fled Virginia because the Sun Belt is too disorderly, and they came up to the Northeast and they bought the high school, which is not being used anymore, and they moved in, and they started, planting gardens where the football field was, and they're doing pretty good. They seem to have a pretty orderly operation going, and the townspeople, of course, are struggling. So this is a scene in the new book involving Brother Job, and he's meeting up with a new character who's being introduced. The book is largely about the 11-year-old son of the town doctor, who commits a crime and has to run away from home and run away from town. And he meets up with a 19-year-old psychopathic bandit on the road and essentially becomes his captive, more or less. Becomes captive in his company for a period of about a little less than a week, during which this guy goes on a crime spree. And the kid gets into worse and worse and worse trouble. The chapters I'm going to read, they're short chapters. They're not going to give too much of the story away. They're sort of sideshows to the main story, but they'll be self-explanatory. So the character that we're meeting here is Billy Bones, the bandit. Brother Job enjoyed the gliding gait of his mount, a mule named Atlas. He was fond of telling people that a mule rode much more smoothly than a good saddle horse, and was smarter, and could stand up to heat better, and was not stubborn, but rather sensible, and disinclined to follow obviously foolish commands that might discommode or injure it. A mule was a superior animal, and he felt positively superior riding one, despite what others might think. And once he got his mule breeding business up and going next spring, he was confident that folks would begin to see the advantage in mules. Of course, people still wanted horses, and he aimed to keep breeding them too, but now he was out a perfectly good stallion. Though it was a pleasant, crisp fall afternoon, and despite his enjoyment at being out on the road riding Atlas, Brother Job suffered in a personal globe of perturbation, knowing as he did now that the doctor's boy had poisoned his stud horse Jupiter. He was further vexed by the knowledge that the boy had eloped from Union Grove and was on the loose somewhere in the county. All politics aside, he wanted to flog the boy within an inch of his life, or maybe beyond that. Brother Job was on a journey to see Stephen Bullock's plantation, several thousand acres of fruitful bottomland and upland, 5 miles outside town, at a place where the Battenkill joined the Hudson River. He had business to discuss with Mr. Bullock, the grandee of the county, with his vast holdings, his many faithful servants, and his personal hydroelectric outfit. Mostly, Brother Job wanted to inquire about getting a stallion to replace Jupiter. America was dearly short of horseflesh. So rapid had been the descent out of the old times to the new. Wasn't it odd, then, Brother Job mused to the soft rocking gait of Atlas the mule, that his daddy had owned the leading Ford dealership in Scott County, Virginia, back in the 20th century. Brother Job had come about halfway to his destination, when, lost in musing about back home, he saw a lone figure up ahead on the road. As he drew closer, the figure began to wave its arms in a broad gesture that reminded Brother Job of a railroad grade crossing signal from the old times. He instinctively reined in Atlas. The lone figure strode forward confidently. The closer he came, the more his appearance resolved from that of a grown man to something like a gangly, overgrown boy. He was perhaps 20, with curly yellow hair and a scraggly blonde beard. His cheeks were sunken, as if he had not been getting regular meals. He had been carrying a bulging leather shoulder sack that he now took off and tossed aside to the edge of the road. "What's up, stranger?" Brother Job said. "And good afternoon to you, too, sir." "A fine day to be rambling." "I'm a rambler and a gambler. You got that right." "That's so? Are you knowing the Lord, son?" The young man dipped his whole body in a guffaw. "Not yet," he said. "Would you like to?" I hope not to meet up with him for some time yet. I like it here on earth, rambling and gambling as I do. Well, you can be born again in this world and know the Lord. I've had enough of birthing, sir. I'm enjoying my prime. Would you like to hear some of my song? Your song? Yes, sir. The Ballad of Billy Bones. That'd be you, Billy Bones? Yes, sir, the very same. Well, I don't have time for no song and dance, son. There ain't any dance to this, not yet anyway. Mind if I pass on the song then? The boy unbuttoned his brown leather coat and drew it open to reveal the butt of an automatic pistol tucked into the waistband of his striped trousers and something that looked like a 2-foot-long brush knife on his other hip. Give it a chance, sir. You won't regret it. Along about now, the only thing I regret is not bringing a firearm to entertain you with. So much the better then, sir, because neither of us will get hurt. Are you ready for my song? Fire away. Well, here goes. When first I came to New York State, my fortune here to find, I followed regular upright ways, was always nice and kind. But as I rambled round the state, a bandit I became. I plied the road with gun and sword, and plundered many a man. He sang these verses in the style of a mournful dirge. During the second verse, he drew the automatic pistol out of his waistband and held it aloft in an emphatic manner. I think I get the picture, Brother Job said. I ain't done, there's more verses. Well, I heard enough. If you got yourself a ukulele, folks might stand it better. You know where I might find such a thing? Brother Job felt his patience melting away. Look at here, son, I don't carry no cash money. This here's a waste of your valuable banditry time. And anyways, you're a darn sorry excuse for a minstrel and a worse robber. You think so? Well, maybe I'll just have that horse of yours. I'm sick of pounding this road. This here's a mule, you dumbass. Mind how you speak to me or someone might get hurt after all. Look right here, boy. Brother Job held an index finger to the outside corner of his eye. Huh? That's right, look right in. You think you can run the snake eye on Billy Bones? I already done it. As we speak, I can see inside your brain pan at a throbbing vein within. I'm surprised you can't feel it. The young man cried out in pain and visibly drooped within himself while his gun hand fell to his side. Sweet Jesus, he moaned. Well, look what you found after all. The young man staggered to the side of the road and squatted into his haunches. What are you doing to me, mister? I'm calling a halt to these monkey shines and giving you something to reflect on. My head's splitting open, the boy said, and vomited between his dusty shoes. It was a thin stream of yellow-green puke, as if he had been eating grass for his breakfast. You'll be all right in a while, as long as you quit the vicinity and don't never show your sorry face around here again. At that, Brother Job gave Atlas some heel, and the big mule resumed his stately walk. As he left Billy Bones on the roadside, the young man was weeping loudly in the sunshine. So he turns up again, shall we say. So this is another chapter, and it's later in the book, and Brother Job has gone to visit the Queen Bee, Mary Beth Ivanhoe, as her Christian name goes. And this will give you a little more of an idea of where they're at together. Mary Beth Ivanhoe, the Queen Bee, has just given birth to quadruplets. She seems to be very productive that way. Everybody else is having trouble reproducing. Brother Job stopped in on Mary Beth Ivanhoe in her queenly quarters before he and his men departed. She lay propped up on a pile of satin pillows in her ornate bed, with a baby in each arm, watching them nurse noisily, beads of sweat making trails from her forehead down the complex topography of her face. The pale flesh of her upper body fell in so many folds that it was difficult to discern which was a breast. "Somebody come and get these runts off of me," she said. Brother Job wheeled around in the rush of Mary Beth's swarming handmaidens, who swooped away the squalling infants, helped the mother with her gusseted silk pajama top, and proffered a tray of fried chicken and cornmeal tidbits, along with a tumbler of sweetened sumac tea. When the infants were out of the way, Mary Beth reclined with an arduous sigh and stared at the food in her lap. "My titties are killing me," she said. "I gotta run split sessions with these critters. There's so many of 'em." "Well, you done us a great good turn," Brother Job said. "Our folks is delirious with the little ones." "Well, can't none of the sisters do a little getting with child? I could use a wet nurse around here." "We're trying." "This is taking every last ounce of energy I got. Don't none of you men got the right spunk?" "Tell you the truth, I think that bomb in Washington all but sterilized this outfit. We took a chance passing so close to that city. Didn't appear to hurt me none." "Well, you're special, precious mother." "Well, get me some damn nipple-end bottles then and milk the cow, why don't you?" The little ones need them antibodies and mother things." "Well, I don't like to how all the actual work falls to me," she said, gasping a little, eyes fluttering in their sockets. For a moment, Brother Job feared she would lapse into one of her seizures. He reached over to stabilize the lunch tray. Moments later, she seemed to come out of it. "You all right?" Brother Job said. "I ain't been right since that sumbitch sideswiped me at the Hunters Ridge Mall in 2006. "Well, of course, we know about your ailments and burdens." "You don't know the half of it." "Well, let me get down to business." "This here ought to be your business," she said, seizing a drumstick. "Mary Beth, I know you're vexed. We're both a bit sore beset this morning. I got 2 men out there waiting for me. I know what you're up to." "Well, I'd appreciate it if you focus your mind and tell me what you know about this fellow they call the Hermit." "He's an odd one," she said, stripping the drumstick to the bone and reaching for her tea. "Has he ever hurt a child?" "Lord, no. Where he goeth, the light shineth." "Where's he at right now?" "He's up north somewheres, not far." "Where exactly?" "The hills." "Hell's bells, I can't give you no coordinates. This ain't the U.S. Missile Command sitting here. Sometimes I don't receive too good, you know. And you tell him to put more salt to these hush puppies when you get a chance. And I'd like some pepper jelly, too." "Is the boy with him?" "The boy's with somebody, not that Hermit. Another boy, older. They're up north somewhere. A valley, a bend in the river." "What's that sourpuss face all about?" "I got a bellyache." "All's you do around me is bellyache. Take some fennel tea. I know the sisters got some. They give it to me. Peppermint works good, too." "Taste this here and tell me if there's a damn bit of salt to it," she said, stabbing a fried corn tidbit with her fork and brandishing it in Brother Job's face. "What all's the matter with you today, Mary Beth? Didn't I just say I got a damn bellyache? I can't eat no fry-up." "Don't you yell at me, sumbitch. You'll give me a damn apoplexy." A baby broke out crying in an adjoining chamber. Then another. "Look what you done now," Mary Beth said, sputtering cornmeals on Brother Job. "They'll put 2 more of them little monsters on me, and I ain't even finished my chicken." All right. I'm kind of half inclined to read another part of this. This is a scene that I actually haven't read much before. Something has happened in Mr. Bullock's house. He's had a home invasion of a bunch of bandits. They've come in and attempted to rob him and rape everybody around the household, and he ended up killing 3 of them. I'll try not to give it away, but 3 of them are now dead, and his men have rounded up the other. I guess there's 9 more of them, and so this scene takes place the following morning, in which he interrogates one of the remaining surviving gang members over breakfast. Around sunrise, the day after his home was invaded, Stephen Bullock decided to hang the rest of the intruders. He drew up a warrant of execution for the 9 men at his breakfast and determined before hanging them to interrogate whoever was next in command after the 3 he had killed in his bedroom. A little after 7 in the morning, he entered the old apple storage cooler where his men were held. He went in alone. 5 of his own men, well armed, remained outside. The captives inside recoiled at the light of the candle lantern when Bullock entered. They all shivered visibly in one corner of the large chamber, where they huddled together in hobbles with their hands tied behind their backs. The room stank of animal wastes and fear. 3 of your men are dead, Bullock told them. I suppose you've figured out who they are by now. Who among you has the authority to speak for the rest of the gang? The men swapped glances all around. Don't be shy, Bullock said. We don't have no official ranks, if that's what you mean, said one man. A large man with a shaved head, perhaps 30 years old. Oh, it seems you speak for the rest. Just for now, the shaved head man said. Okay, I nominate you spokesman. And second it. All in favor? Aye. See, you're elected. Get up and come with me. Where are we going? You're going to have breakfast with me, and we're going to talk. The man got up off his haunches and glanced back at his companions. He was rangy, gaunt, and hollow-eyed, but obviously very strong. The tendons in his neck stood out like wires. Come, Bullock said. The man shuffled in his hobbles, which only allowed him to take tiny steps. Bullock and his 5 men, armed with rifles and pistols, walked him to the mansion. The clear morning was already blooming into a spectacularly warm Indian summer day, with many stimulating aromas in the air. Fresh-cut hay, burning brush, sorghum boiling, cornbread baking. Bullock led his prisoner into a sunny conservatory wing of the house and directed the man to have a seat at a glass-topped table. The cords that bound his hands behind his back were removed, though the hobbles on his ankles remained. Bullock's chore man, Roger Lippy, a Chrysler dealer in the old times, laid a stiff white cloth on the table and set it with silver tableware and damask napkins rolled into silver rings. Bullock held up a sterling silver fork and examined it in a shaft of sunlight. Too bad you didn't get to rob the place, Bullock said. We have a lot of nice things here. The prisoner didn't reply. Roger Lippy stood by the table with a tray at his side. What would you like for breakfast? Bullock asked the prisoner. You going to give me breakfast? Certainly. Why? Aren't you hungry? Not especially. Okay, I'll order for you. Roger, tell Lila to make this fellow a 4-egg omelet with some of that Dwaynesburg cheddar cheese, bacon, sausage, hash browns, and cornbread with the raspberry preserves. Yes, sir. Yourself? I'll just have tea, Bullock said. Tea for you? He asked the prisoner, who just grunted. It's real black china tea, Bullock added. None of that fruity herbal crap. It'll give you a real lift. Go on, give yourself a break. Okay, the prisoner said. Roger Lippy left them. Bullock's other men took up positions standing or sitting outside the conservatory, on display, but out of earshot. Sparrows flitted in and out of the room through the ventilation louvers. What's your name? Bullock asked. What's it matter? Well, it should matter to you. It's your name. You can't defend your honor without defending your name, can you? It's Jason Hammershield. You couldn't have made that up. It's my name. Where's this gang of yours from? It's not my gang. Well, I don't mean you own it, but obviously you're a member. Roger Lippy brought out a tray with a teapot and 2 matching cups and saucers. Bullock poured for both of them. The cream's from our own dairy, and the sugar's made from our own beets, though we're working up a sorghum operation right now, Bullock said. So, Jason, where do you and your associates hail from? Waterbury, Connecticut. We've been on the road a while. How are things back in the Nutmeg State? The what? Connecticut. They sucked, which is how come we took to the road. Have you had many adventures? It's a hard life. Well, you must not be very good at what you do. We're all right, but it's slim pickings out there. Well, then it's extra sad that you messed up here. We're living large. We've got full bellies, electric power, amber waves of grain, groaning orchards, and a nice big house with first-rate furnishings. I can see. Oh, you only see a teensy-weensy bit of what we've got going. Want me to put on some recorded music? I've got it all. Broadway musicals, classical, old Bob Dylan. Roger Lippy reappeared with Jason Hammershield's breakfast and a basket of cornbread, a ramekin of butter, and a dish of blackberry jam. The prisoner stared at the steaming plate that was set before him. Put on some Debussy, would you, Roger? The first preludes. Sure thing, sir. Go ahead, dig in, Bullock said to his prisoner, who continued to stare darkly into his plate. How do I know this is not poison? Bullock laughed sincerely. You moron, if I wanted to kill you, I'd have one of my men shoot you in the head. Go ahead and eat. Jason Hammershield looked up at Bullock, squinting with dull incomprehension. I'll be very cross with you if you just let it sit there, Bullock added. The prisoner took a tentative forkful of his omelet, then ate more rapidly until he was fairly inhaling the contents of his plate in a fugue of deprivation. He reached into the basket for some cornbread, slathered it with butter, and spooned jam on top. What I want to know, Bullock continued, is whether you're part of some larger horde. Some what? Jason Hammershield said. You know, a larger unit of people like yourselves, an army of marauders, scavenging across the land like locusts. Jason Hammershield chewed ruminatively. No, he said eventually, we're just who we are, a bunch of guys. What do you call your bunch? Nothing. Really? I'd think you'd sit around the campfire at night memorializing your exploits. What are what? Making up stories about yourselves for your own amusement, creating a myth for posterity. We just fall out and sleep. It's hard living like we do. Well, all I can say is you boys are seriously lacking in imagination. Jason Hammershield mopped up the last remaining specks of egg, hash browns, and crumbs of bacon with a triangle of cornbread. Allow me to suggest a name, Bullock said. The Nutmeg Boys. Or perhaps just the Nutmeggers. Jason Hammershield made a face and snorted. What happens now, he said, tossing his napkin on his plate. Just some legal rigmarole, Bullock said. Do you boys have a lawyer? No. Want me to represent you? I'm a member of the bar. That don't sound right. These are rugged times, admittedly, for the machinery of justice. By a stroke of luck, though, there's a magistrate on the premises. Who would that be? Yours truly, Bullock said. I see, Jason Hammershield said. You the jury, too? Pretty much. I could appoint some of my people, but they just do what I tell them, so why bother? A green look came over the prisoner as the horizon of his future finally resolved into a featureless landscape of grievous futility. He puffed out his cheeks, his eyes rolled up into his head, and he vomited his breakfast back into his plate. It's been nice chatting with you, Jason, but I have an awful lot to look after here. We're slaughtering some hogs today. It's the season for it. Bullock left the prisoner staring blankly into the panes of the conservatory walls and went outside to where his men waited. Take all these fellows down to the river road, Bullock told the versatile Dick Lee, and hang them there at 20-yard intervals. So there you have it. If you have any questions, you can ask me a couple of questions, and I'll sign some books, and then we'll go back to our wives and children. Well, it's writing novels is always problematical. You have the thing about writing fiction, because I write both fiction and nonfiction, and the trouble with nonfiction is you have to be correct about stuff. With fiction, all you have to do is be plausible. All you have to do is suspend the reader's disbelief and not shake their disbelief. So I'll figure that out somehow. It'll.